here at Shaw Media, which obviously is a publisher of the Northwest Herald. So we certainly appreciate it. As John said, just got a few questions we want to ask each of you as we try to formulate our endorsement and also write a story about this race. Get started with a pretty general question. I think we'll start with you, Jim.
Okay.
Can you just introduce yourself and tell us why you're running in this race?
Okay, my name's Jim Malone. I'm a tradesman with Local 265 Sheet Metal Workers. I'm in this race because I don't think we're being represented properly. Our current representative, just recently, we just spoke about wants to deregulate the salons and barbers, and that's just a health issue. So deregulation is not the answer. He votes no to cap insulin prices. He votes no on all labor bills, which irritates me. He voted no on the infrastructure bill. Pretty hard to get money after you vote no. And pretty much everything he votes on, I disagree with. So instead of sitting and yelling at the TV, I decided to jump in.
And Suzanne?
There's a couple of principal reasons why I'm running. One is I've been on the county board for going on to 2 years now. And what I've learned there is that a lot of the issues that we face or that we're trying to solve as problems like property taxes and other statewide issues really originate, the solutions are at the state level. So that was one principal reason why I had started considering running at the state level. And like Mr. Malone, I agree that our area has just been underrepresented for a number of years, and I wanted to change that. But my third big reason, HB 348, House Bill 348, that had to do with consolidation in McHenry County. When I read that bill and I read the transcripts from the floor of that bill, I realized we have no local representation there. The idea that we can do this in 90 days just to me spoke volumes to what a disconnect there was at the state level. And so for those reasons, I decided to step in.
Very good. Okay, well, you mentioned a point that I wanted to ask directly about property taxes. What should state government be doing right now to try to reduce the property tax burden on citizens, Suzanne?
So, well, here at McHenry County, and you already know this, we've done that the last 3 years in a row, even prior to getting onto the board, reducing the levy, making a concerted effort. And I think one thing Chairman Franks has done really well is continuing to promote and put that narrative out there that this is an issue and it's an urgent one that needs to be addressed. Clearly, that's a small thing that we can do here locally. But I did read the report that came out from the subcommittee or the task force last year, on which several legislators broke around different areas, assessments, levies. We haven't had real reform in property tax reform at a state level since 1970, and most of the tenets of the law are from 1901. So obviously this is a change. A few things stuck out to me in that report. One was looking at how we're assessing corporate buildings and retailers and making that more of a fair process, because we don't right now have a good way to assess that. So therefore, the burden of property taxes falls to residences, which is much easier to assess because it's more stable and you can compare values more easily. So that would be one. But there's a multitude of issues. And the second one, I think, for me would be that we have to look at generating revenue. So looking at diversifying our tax base and not relying so heavily on property taxes.
Okay. Jim Malone, same question to you. What should state government be doing to reduce property tax?
Well, I agree that that's a huge problem. That's most people, that's their big issue. As most people know, most of our property taxes go to pay for the schools. I think the state should step up and pay for the majority of schools so it doesn't rely on property taxes and property owners. Some big, giant, wealthy corporations need to pay their fair share. We need to stop giving tax breaks for example, Sears. We gave them a great tax break and we never got our money back because they're gone now, but their CEO sure got some money. So I think we need to stop doing that. If you can't afford to do business, then maybe you can't afford to do business. Like Ms. Ness said, I'm a trustee for the Village of Carpentersville. We haven't raised our property tax levy in 3 years. We also cut where things need to be cut and look at other forms of revenue, such as the video gambling and the legalized cannabis. We're going to try to raise some revenue that way. And also the fair tax that Governor Pritzker wants to pass, I believe would really help, because the middle class has been paying its way too much and way more than our fair share for way too long, and we need a break.
Well, that just dovetails with the next thing I want to ask about. So Jim Malone will stick with you. You've already said that you do support the governor's fair tax plan. What do you think is sensible tax policy? What would you be inclined to support as a member of the state legislature in terms of income tax?
Obviously, the more you make, you should pay a little more, especially if you're extremely wealthy. It's not going to hurt you to pay a little more, whereas a middle-class person, an extra $100 a month, that's a lot of money. That's a trip to the grocery store or part of a car payment. The federal government has a graduated tax plan, and most states do, so it only seems reasonable that Illinois should adopt that also.
Suzanne, Ness, same question to you. Do you support the governor's fair tax plan, and what sort of income tax policy would you support in the legislature?
I do also support the plan, at least from what I know of it at this point. It's largely only going to impact less than 3% of people in the state. I don't know that a number of people know that. But I want to change the language a little bit, because I think one thing, I'm a Democrat, but we use a lot of language like, billionaires and millionaires should pay their fair share. And it often sounds like we're punishing people that have been successful. Proportionally, taxes should be proportionate. People who can pay more because proportionally it impacts them differently, then that's more of a fair tax base. People who make less, proportionally, it's a hardship to them. So creating a tax base that's fair for the wide range of income levels is a wise thing to do. So that I support that.
Okay, great. Wanted to ask, we'll stick with you, Suzanne Ness. There's been a lot of talk lately about sanctuary cities. The governor had a policy recently where the prisons aren't holding convicts who might face possible detention hearings or deportation hearings, rather. Do you agree with sanctuary city policies? Is that something that we should allow or tolerate or encourage in the state of Illinois?
That's a good question. And what I would say is we have an administration right now that is targeting and penalizing people who, for a variety and multitude of reasons, may be here in the United States. And it's not a system that's easy, and it's not always fair. Immigration is complicated, and it's been my hope and wish that the federal government would finally come out with some immigration reform, true reform, that would help solve the issue. But in the case of our current administration, I feel that people have been unfairly targeted, and in that respect, sometimes standing up and saying this isn't okay is something that's important to do. And so I do support sanctuary cities in the way that we don't put ourselves in any kind of out of compliance with the law, but more that we're letting people know we're not going to contribute to policies that we think are unfair or targeted to people, especially people that are innocent and who perhaps just don't quite understand the process. So in that regard, I am in favor of sanctuary cities.
Okay. Jim Malone, same question to you. Do you support sanctuary cities and some of the policies that our state and local leaders are putting in place where they don't turn over or cooperate with federal immigration authorities?
I do support sanctuary cities, mostly because our federal administration is out of control, and there has to be a way to stand up and say no. I know in Carpentersville, we do not cooperate with ICE at all. The only way we will assist is if we have a warrant signed by a judge. I believe Kane County Sheriff has the same policy. People are being targeted just because they're an immigrant. Some people are trying to escape violence, and what kind of country are we if we can't welcome the most needy?
Well, let's stick with you then, Jim. Want to ask about the Speaker of the House, Michael Madigan, who is the leader of the state Democratic Party. He's also probably the most powerful man in Springfield. He's the longest-serving speaker in United States history. There's also a new federal investigation that seems to be swirling around his circle right now. If you were elected to the legislature, would you vote for or support Michael Madigan to be the Speaker of the House?
Well, at this point, since he is not supporting me and is actively working against me with my own union dollars, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say no. I've already stood up to him numerous times and said no, because he's asked me to drop off this race. He's asked me to pull my name off the ballot, not him personally. And I guess my answer to dropping off the ballot is, I'll drop off the ballot when they cut off my arm and sign the papers with my cold, dead hand.
Okay. Suzanne, that same question for you. If you're elected to the legislature, will you vote for Michael Madigan to continue his tenure as Speaker of the House?
So, first of all, assuming that I get past the primary and then I move into the general, that's a long time between now and then. So I really can't answer that question because a lot can happen in that time.
Okay. Want to ask about the pension obligations that are currently crippling the state of Illinois. Our state leads the country in pension debt that is unfunded, pension obligations, and yet there's not a lot that currently seems to be being done to address this issue. What steps should our state government be taking, if any, to address the unfunded pension obligations that it has? Suzanne, can we start with you?
Sure. I want to clarify one thing on the sanctuary city question. We were talking about immigration and not sanctuary.
Immigration.
Okay, just making sure. My second, so I have three main points to pension reform. The first is, I liked the consolidation of pensions that Governor Pritzker did. I thought that was a great first step in the right direction. A lot of people were afraid of that, but I thought that was a courageous thing to do and a smart thing to do, because it will allow those funds to grow more and earn interest, and thereby provide the pension obligations. The second thing that needs to happen, and actually in my Sun-Times editorial column, they mentioned one of my ideas. If you are receiving a pension from another position, tax-funded pension, I think you should only get one. I don't think that you should get three or more. We have people that are doing that currently. I don't care if you take the highest pension, and that's fine. But this idea of people taking multiple pensions, I think, is wrong. And the third would be, any question of pension reform needs to include the stakeholders and the people that are impacted by that. And I don't know that any true effort has been made to sit down with people who are recipients of the pension, or the ones that are the most to lose in that. And so I would want any solution to include their voices at the table.
Sometimes there's a suggestion that the state constitution be amended in order to give a freer hand to pension reform. Is that something you would support?
I'm not sure. My initial answer is no, because we have an obligation. We made a deal with people. That deal has to be honored. And so in that regard, I don't know that it would matter. When it comes to future arrangements, I can tell you, like at the county board, they gave us the option. We could either take the pension, or we were offered a 457K plan, or we could not take it altogether. I chose not to take either, because in a position like this, I don't feel like it's really necessary or warranted. So I said no. I think we can do the same thing with state employees, and certainly with elected officials. I want to separate elected officials from employees. I think employees are different. But elected officials, I think we should be doing the same thing. Give them the option.
Gotcha. Jim Malone, same question for you. What steps should state government be taking to address the unfunded pension liabilities that are crippling the state budget?
Well, first, I think we need to honor the obligations that we made, because we made promises and we have to honor those. Going forward, a good thing to do, I think, would be to look towards the union trades pensions. My pension is fully funded. We take zero money from taxpayers. It's all funded by us. It's a very healthy pension, and that's maybe something we could look at as a model. Mr. Skillicorn sent out a mailer about his ideas for the pension, and there was all these points about it, and I disagree with every single one, because it's unfair to the promises we made. You can't just take away something that people have paid into. Obviously, it's a problem because it's very expensive. We need to raise revenue. Combining pensions in the municipalities, like the police and fire, is a good idea. Amending the Constitution, that's a huge step. So I don't think we should go that route very lightly. There's other ways we can try to reduce the burden of the pensions. I do agree with, if you're taking one pension from taxpayers, that should be enough. the taxpayers aren't paying for it, then you can take whatever you'd like because it's your own money. And I just think that we just really need to make sure we honor our obligations, whether that means new revenue or, going forward, maybe we can say, okay, this position, you don't get quite as big of a pension. And then you can decide whether you'd like that job or not. But once we've already made a deal, we have to stick with it.
Understood. So you both, right now anyway, as it stands, the seat is held by an incumbent who's facing his own primary challenge. But regardless, there's I've heard sort of both of you express that you don't feel like the area has been well represented. What ways do you feel like the area has not been well represented, and how could you do better for it in Springfield? Jim Malone, could we start with you?
Well, the one main thing is infrastructure bill. Voting no on that is, as a construction worker, that's inexcusable. Infrastructure makes our community better. It makes it more attractive to people that want to move here and raise families. It makes it more attractive to business, which will raise our tax base. And it's not only roads and bridges. That's what everyone thinks when you talk infrastructure. It's police stations, water treatment plants, which, by the way, Mr. Skillicorn doesn't believe is part of infrastructure. But a water treatment plant is part of infrastructure, and so are all public works buildings. I know Carpentersville could use a new police station, so we could use some money, and I'm sure Algonquin, Lake in the Hills, Crystal Lake, everyone could use some help with their public works buildings. And that's just part of public safety.
Suzanne, Ness, same question to you. How do you feel like you could better represent this area in the legislature?
So I'm a business owner. I'm a small business owner. I've been in the business community in Northern Kane County for more than 13 years as a part of the Chamber of Commerce, and I've had lots of conversations with business owners over the years in that area. And so there's a couple of things I know just about the area in general, and one is, as a region, you've got a lot of smaller municipalities and townships and entities that don't necessarily work together. I asked a township supervisor down there about intergovernmental agreements. She said they hardly use them at all, which I found extraordinary because we do that in McHenry County quite often, especially when it comes to services for the community. So regional leadership would be really helpful in this regard. The other place I see a lack of that is in the fact that within the borders of the 66, there's no community college or vocational training facility. We have ECC to the south, we have MCC to the north, workforce dollars that come from the federal government, of which they have increased the amount of money that goes there because we've received it in McHenry County. A lot of times that money flows through the county to community colleges who have to be able to take the jobs. We have no concerted effort of that in the 66. And I know a couple of the larger business owners in the area, that's one of their biggest complaints is how they can find and attract skilled workers to the area. So I think that would be like a huge way that this position could really help bring people together and utilize their resources and leverage that regional presence. This area gets a little bit ignored, quite frankly, from the south in Kane County and from the north in McHenry. So in addition to the things that Mr. Malone mentioned about infrastructure, the people that get the money are the ones that are there advocating for it. That's how you get resources to your area. But you have to know what the issues are first. And that means talking to everybody, not just to the people that support you or agree with you. So.
Okay, great. Wanted to now sort of give you both an opportunity to say why you feel like you're the most electable candidate. Also talk about any other issues that you feel like we haven't addressed here. Suzanne, Ness, we can start with you.
Sure, thank you. I would start by saying I'm a mom. I've been a working mom the whole time I've had children, and a small business owner, and I've had a wide variety of experiences that have brought me into contact with people from all over the spectrum, wealthier, less wealthy, a wide range of experiences that has allowed me to see perspectives and to understand what issues are, what people care about, what they face. And I really care about other people. I've been raised my entire life to give back, to be a part of my community, and to help people out where they need that. So I feel a call to service. I always have. And this is an area where I feel like as a higher calling a public service, there is no higher calling. So we've had a lot of bad players over the years, people that have taken advantage of these positions to their own benefit, and I find that reprehensible. So that was a large reason why I stepped up. I don't have a lot of political experience, so I don't have a lot of, I'm not jaded in that regard, and I feel like that gives me a different perspective walking into it. So I'm just excited at the idea of representing this district.
Jim Malone?
Well, I'm just a working guy, and I think we need more of that in Springfield. I go to work, except for today. I get up early, I put on tools, I wear a yellow vest. I think people can relate to that because I can relate to working class people. I am not part of the machine. I think we need more of that in Springfield too. And I think I can beat Mr. Skillicorn because I am not intimidated by him. I don't agree with him. I will stand up and fight against him. If I'm not intimidated by the state party, I'm not going to be intimidated by the Republicans. I think I can beat him, and I think that's why people should vote for me.
All right, thank you.